Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Hotline League. Normally, we talk about all these boring esports things, but for one of the first times I think that we've ever had on the show, we're not going to be talking about too many esports topics. We will still be talking about League of Legends topics as we dive into the world of Arcane with a special guest who I will introduce here shortly. But first off, let me introduce my co-host, as always, for the evening. It's Cubby. How's it going, Cubby?
Good. I'm excited for this one. Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be really neat as you and I no longer have to worry about people shit talking pro players, and instead they're going to just complain about what happened to their favorite champion in their favorite show. So we'll get into that in just a second. But let me go ahead and introduce somebody I've known for a very long time, none other than Alex Yee, who's the co-creator of Arcane. How's it going, Alex?
Hello. Happy
Welcome.
to be here.
Welcome to the show.
Similarly excited.
I'm very excited to have you on because I feel like you tend to take a more quiet background role in a lot of media opportunities, and Christian usually runs out to the front in front of you. So it's fun to have you on to chat with you.
I will endeavor to give you the cool responses and not the reasons that I'm like, Christian's really good at this, and that's a great reason to put him in front.
Well, I got to say, before we dive into talking about Arcane stuff, I do just want to note, because I think a lot of people are very familiar with Christian's contributions to the series, but maybe you can give a little bit of background on yourself and maybe even what your first job was at Riot Games.
Sure. So I started with Riot in around like July of 2009, where it was a Craigslist post that seemed very different from the company that grew out of it, and that gave me a very different impression of whether it was a good idea for me to join. And so my first role was, I guess, a community intern, and I think it's actually part of this journey how it seemed to me something that seemed like a just a hope, in a place where it's I'm like, that seems like an impossible thing to grow there. That that over the time that I started becoming familiar with League of Legends and the people who were working on it and kind of like what mattered to them and how they were building it, that became so compelling, that to me, this community intern job, which grew into the first, I guess, real or permanent job, which was the first customer support or player support, as we migrated it to. That was I guess the first permanent position that I had at Riot, and it was also a position of figuring out what that should be, and I guess participating with a bunch of other people in building that team. One crazy cat that I hired, really honestly, in the biggest part because he spoke German, but that is not to undercut any of the other striking features about what I saw in him, but also did not see and learned over time, and I think grew alongside of, was Christian. So we both kind of got to know each other in this customer support department, and I had always had an interest in, I guess, the writing and storytelling in video games, and the company at that time, like it had, you were always wearing a lot of hats, and so wearing the hat of participating in things that grew into building the world and the characters was always kind of a piece of what I was doing as kind of like a fun side quest to the the main quest of being of fulfilling the duties of customer support as much as I could. Christian, I think similarly, was also doing this with regards to music, and I think the ways in which those things grew, for all the wild and wacky reasons that they grew in the ecosystem of Riot on that journey, I guess sort of wound up in both of us thinking that if Riot was based on this seemingly impossible dream, maybe it made sense for us to embark on the project of working on Arcane, and very weird conversation led to that in a way that I did not expect, but that I've had a lot of reflection about over the years. But that's where we kind of grew out of, and I think the shortest way I can explain how it relates to Arcane.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I mean it's been super fun to see your path. I always tease you. I know I probably bring it up too much when I see you, but about the Journal of Justice, the original iteration of League of Legends lore, and it's just so. I bring it up if only because I always think of it every time I see Arcane, and just it very much mirrors the development path of the entire company as it went from being a literally small indie studio, figuring out little fun ways to put out lore snippets to eventually this hit that's on Netflix and all over the globe, but people are watching it, so it's really cool to see. Cubby, before we get into a couple more questions that I know you and I probably have for Alex, we probably have some folks here that are watching for the first time that are not used to the way that the call-in feature of the show works. So do you want to give an explanation of how this all goes down?
Yeah, so if you guys have any Arcane questions, you can join us through Discord, discord.gg/Travis. Head to the Discord, give your take in pleb topics or subtopics at me, at Cubby, so we make sure that we see it. And then you have to be in the Discord so we can drag you into the waiting room and have you call into the show. So if you just want to AFK on one of the calls and we decide to take your call, we'll end up dragging you in. You can speak with Travis, Alex, and myself and get all your Arcane questions answered. So it should be fun.
Yeah, and to that point, if I think normally the show features a lot of people who are calling in with their take, like, oh, I think Cloud9's going to win or Team Liquid's going to lose or something like that. If you have takes, that is very fun. If you're like, oh, I think that this was really cool, or I thought that this was something that I would love to see fleshed out, I'm sure that'll be fun to talk about it. But to your point, Cubby, we also are happy to just field questions. I know the community has a lot of questions, and while there's been a lot of interviews and content around it, I'm sure folks still have some stuff. So we'll see what Alex can talk about. I don't know if he can reveal the fate of every character in the show, but hopefully we'll see what folks want to talk about. But to that point, Cubby, as we're still getting those takes lined up in the waiting room, do you have any questions that you wanted to toss Alex's way from watching the last couple seasons?
I mean, what was the process of at least getting this thing started for you guys? Because obviously your role changed a lot from customer support, but like how far back does this go? And was this something where how much agency did you have in pitching what the world was like, having this take place in Zaun, Piltover, and having it be Arcane, or was that kind of decided top down at the start?
So Jinx and Vi as sort of like an anchor in beginning to explore what the show could be, and Piltover and Zaun were both elements that pretty early on they became anchors, and I think a big part of that is because there are things in the nature of I guess the what we had worked on and were interested at the company that connected very strongly, I think, to those being a starting point for the discussion. I think also there are elements that you might think about in the visual identity of the show where, like, for instance, there are elements of Paris in Piltover and vice versa, if that can be said in any sensible way, that made it seem like working with Fortiche, this would also be a thing that their connection to it would add something that we thought they would just naturally hit in a really awesome way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that those things made those actually, as you called them out, the first points of anchors. Building out from there, I think I think League was built, or the lore of it was built by creating these champions, and each of them became kind of like a spotlight to look at the world around it. And so in that framework, what we were focused on was kind of like the character journeys and sort of like the that this was a story that was rooted in character and that we wanted to really make sure that the truths of that weren't something that we contorted, I guess, beyond what we were thinking helped this story. And then basically, I think once we started from that point, everything everything slotted into place from those considerations, but at every point so they sort of introduced more. Most of it, in terms of you're asking me, did it present as a process that I could think of as a good way to start it? I would definitely say there were a lot of things that were not that, and in the process of reinventing many wheels, because one of the kind of mind-blowing things about this was that, like, really none of us had ever worked on a TV show or something of this scale, and I think we felt like that was something that was simultaneously important to tailoring it really specifically for League, but also something that did lead us to at least have to consider reinventing a lot of wheels along the way. I think that covers it.
Yeah.
What? Yeah, I have something that's a little less related to the specific project of Arcane, but more to the fact that I was at that finale event. I bumped into you there at the end. But how I know you had done a ton of screenings. Even for season 1, there were screenings, etc. I'm sure you sat through so many times of other people watching the work, and especially as you're developing it. The finale of it, to me, felt crazy because I assume there was not any screening that was of that scale. I mean, I remember the premiere on the Riot campus. There were probably like 400 or 500 people in the tent or the dome that they built. But this was, I think, something like, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000 people in that lower area, all fans. And I've talked about this before on the show, how crazy it was to see all the scenes where the crowd was just going crazy. And so I guess, what was it like for you to not only have it be the official night where like the show was ending and it was the finale and all that, but also to experience all of that with this audience that's just live reacting in the most dramatic ways to everything that's happening in those final episodes?
Like, weirdly, this is one of the few times that I felt like me being immersed in it as an audience member felt like that. And I honestly wouldn't be able to tell you why, because I feel like all the way you're asking the question to me, it's the same conditions that I thought I was looking at, at the other screenings. And there are pieces of it where, like, it does remind me of, I think, the first premiere, in ways, but things are flipped in a lot of places where it's very tricky for me to figure out why they're flipped, but what I can say is, like, what it really felt like the most was that it was probably the most distinct time that, in watching this content, I felt like I was also part of the audience. But I don't actually think it was because I was, like, worried, I guess, but there was something in the scale of the reactions and just kind of like the feeling, I guess, of being there that for me felt confirming of going there, even though I think in a lot of ways the specifics of it do not necessarily indicate that any of those things are exactly the thing someone was or wasn't looking for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I thought it was just the first couple of moments, the first 10 minutes, I think, even of, because it started with episode 7, and you're seeing it was kind of the perfect way for that audience to get brought back into it, because you're flipping through all these characters, not just characters that we've seen in recent episodes, but also characters we haven't really seen or spent time with since season 1. And so hearing the audience like live react and like just cheer and lose their mind every time a new character enters the screen, I thought was super fun. And I assume for you and Christian must have been a really unique experience. So
yeah, cool. It was a type of release and a type of inspiration that, very hard to define, and but very fulfilling. And yeah, there's just something in that energy, that feels like real on a level that's deeper. You know what I mean? Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, Cubby, if you have any other questions, otherwise I'm happy to just move on to grabbing callers.
No, I think we can grab some callers. Selfishly, I want to ask for the idea of, Warwick and Vander, or like Vander becoming Warwick kind of came, but I kind of want to call her to start asking
Well,
away, you know?
we'll sneak yours in if we don't get a caller about it. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
we'll find
we
time.
can sneak that one in. I thought that was one of the cooler ideas for what, you know, the show ended up being, to kind of restructure that character. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, let's grab into a call. Anyone that you want to do first, Travis?
No, I think anybody that you've probably seen a lot of the questions that folks been submitting, so
Yeah,
whatever makes sense for you.
cool. Let's fire away.
Quick shout out to everybody who's subbing. I'm not going to spend too much time reading off everybody's subs like that we normally do, just because I know we have a lot to get into tonight, and so I want to make sure that we can get through everything. If you are just joining the stream, we have Alex E, who is one of the co-creators of Arcane, on to talk about all things Arcane. We are taking your questions and takes in the Discord. You can do !Discord in the chat to be able to get a link to it. I see Numi just posted that there. And then also, once you do put your take into Discord, make sure that you join one of the rooms so that we can pull you in if your take is suggested. We have Thor here. Thor, where are you calling from?
Hey, Travis. I'm calling from Columbia, Missouri.
Columbia, Missouri. What do you want to talk about on the show tonight?
I, since season 1, have been dying to ask about Batman and Batman references in Arcane. So I noticed a pretty specific reference to a Batman comic in the season 1 finale, specifically reference to the New 52 run Death of the Family. I can explain the reference in detail if people aren't familiar with it, but it's a pretty pointed reference there in the finale scene with Jinx and Kate and Vi all around the table with Silco tied up and the dolls and everything. And so, one, I wanted to ask who that worked on the show is a big Batman fan. I'm just curious. But also, were there other references to visual media that you guys stuck in the show that you're really happy with, or maybe that people didn't notice? Because that's one that I haven't heard a lot of folks talk about, is that reference to Death of the Family. So
one part of you asking that makes me think that it is visual, the reference that you're talking about, or is it some other level, I guess, of a reference?
Yeah, so in the comics, the sort of finale of that comic run, the Joker has captured all of the Bat family. So you got Robin and Batgirl and maybe Nightwing, and they're all tied up at a dinner table with gauze on their face, and we're given a fake out where it looks like they're like each member of the Bat family has their face on a platter in front of them, and they're going to like be served their own head for dinner. So with everybody tied up at the table and the fake out of Caitlyn's head under the silver platter, where we even get like that one frame where Vi thinks she sees Kate, it just seemed way too specific to be an accident. Maybe it was, but it just was really striking visually, very similar to that panel in the comic when Jinx throws the lighter and all the candles light up, and you have like Silco tied up on one side and Vi tied up on the other, and the dolls are on the table. It just looked a lot like that panel from the comics.
So there, there are a lot of references that we make, like as a way of kind of like honing in, I think, on the same thing that exists in the middle of those, that is, oftentimes like the super cool thing that we're trying to figure out how to add a spice of into the show. And it gets really tricky in the like looking back at it, to what extent something is a spice from a specific reference. And there's another element of it, which is that a lot of people work on different parts of the show, and things that they add can really increase or decrease the degree to which it seems like one of those references. There are a ton of people who I know who work on the show who are Batman fans, so a very high potential probability, that some of that can be in the mix. Unfortunately, I don't actually know the reference, so I can't. It's hard for me to connect it on that level. I can say that there is a type of imagery like that is also in, for me, Titus Andronicus, which is a kind of a weird reference related to it. But that was something that I think I tapped into when another thing that was referenced, which, like, I wish I could explain all the ways that these references are also not the final thing, you know, like, because it's the discussions about how they are and aren't that really produce the thing. But that was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I just, it seems important to specify the ways that it wasn't that, but it, you know, I think those were the things that were in my head for my part, you know, the biggest parts. I had done some writing for this scene prior to it taking that shape, which was also in the mix. And so I guess the best I can answer you is to say that these are examples of how it very potentially can be related to specifically what you're asking. And I'm unaware of that, but in what I'm aware of, that wasn't one of the references that has a big footprint.
Were there, to kind of the broader question from the caller, were there any particular inspirations you can think of on a broader level that you brought into Arcane? I mean, I know we're all kind of inspired by everything we watch whenever we bring these things in, but I don't know if there was, for instance, anything where you're like, oh man, I love this so much and I really want Arcane to reach in this direction, or this is a show that I would love Arcane to aspire to be, that type of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. You know, Game of Thrones was almost an impossible comparison not to make, you know, because of the way that show, I think, almost revolutionized the legitimacy of the genre, you know, in the form that it had, like, kind of like alongside the development of this show, where in some ways that's something we were hoping to bring to it. So a lot of parts of Game of Thrones came up at many points. Peaky Blinders was something Christian and I really responded to, and so I think that, like, really specifically, kind of the dialogue, I think, was the dialogue and performance related to it were things that we really keyed into. In fact, you know, like, anecdotally, there were a lot of times where I would hit a point of feeling stuck and watch scenes that I had watched for that exact same reason over again. And I don't know why I did that exactly. I can just tell you that I did it as a way of kind of jump starting my own brain to think about, like, yeah, this is cool to me, and I want to bring that. Trying to think of, Cowboy Bebop is, for me and some of the other people, like some of the directors, I think, a clear, you know, connect, and like, you know, the music elements of that blended with kind of like what I think Cowboy Bebop is like, the way in which it's called classic, and the way in which the elements of music and the storytelling kind of made it something different. There's a very strong comparison. Samurai Champloo, because of the way that it was developed by the people who developed Cowboy Bebop, and then the other ways that it also did that. There's so many, you know, honestly. I think I'm covering. Oh, there's one that's actually really funny, and it's one of the Easter eggs, so maybe it connects also to another part of your question. When we were presenting kind of like the rawest and first vision that we had for the run of the first season, there was a moment where the directors asked us, have you seen Darville? And I was like, Darville? And they're like, yeah, Darville. And I'm like, I don't know. Doesn't sound familiar, you know, for kind of too long for us to then realize at some point, oh, they're saying Daredevil, which definitely,
the French
definitely was recent at the time, and definitely applied in a ton of ways to what we were talking about. In my head, that spelled out as Dardeville, which I'm like, town in France, maybe? No idea. But there is a poster in the background of Arcane that says Darville with that spelling as just an Easter egg to us about that reference, and it is that is the form of an Easter egg with regard to what you're talking about. So I hope that's a nugget that connects to the question. And I'm sorry that I can't answer the Batman section. There were comics for me, but not Batman. I was more Spider-Man and X-Men, and then just some non sequitur comics, I think. So those are kind of the more mainstay ones for me.
I can't speak to the caller that when I saw that it was I immediately thought of that comic as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm not the only one, Kevin. I when we watched the finale the first time, I remember pausing it and having to explain to my wife. It was like, oh my god, this is Death of the Family.
Yeah.
And then, I went and got my comic and found the panel and everything. It was so it's pretty interesting to me that it was such a striking visual reference, and yet some people that worked on the show weren't familiar with it. It's I guess maybe using the word inspiration would be better than reference, right? It wasn't probably constructed that way just to talk about Batman, but just the way we consume media gets into the way we tell stories. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, and being honest with you, I really bet that if I went and I probably will go read that comic right now, it will be impossible for me to not also see that same thing that you're talking about. So I'm betting I'm with you.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it probably just goes to show all the different folks that work on the show and how much everybody's different references make it in and inspirations. So, pretty awesome. All right, Thor, thanks so much. Is there anything you want to shout out here or say at the end?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me on. I'm a huge fan of Arcane, so I want to shout out Alex and the rest of the team. I think Arcane is one of the best pieces of media I've ever consumed. I loved it so much. It's great too for me to be able to share it with friends that don't play the game. I think we've all played games or read books and had this thought, I wish other people could experience this world the way I do. And now we actually can, because we can show them the show. So shout out to the whole team for that. Shout out Covey. I always appreciate when you talk about Tier 2 and Collegiate League. I actually participated in the first ever Collegiate Open for North America back in 2013 or 2014, whenever that was. I'm not good. I wasn't good then. I'm not good now, but I can claim that I played competitive league for 3 rounds in a tournament. So
cool.
Keep it up there. And Travis, thanks for having me. Shout out Pagoda Snacks, and thanks again.
Thanks so much for the call. Actually, Alex, question for you, because I know obviously our show is often focused on esports, but I did notice at least one, I'm trying to think if there were any in season 1, but at least one esports Easter egg where the wheel had a bunch of the team logos on it in season 2, and people zoomed in and saw these different logos. Is this stuff when I reference that, do you know what I'm talking about, or are these things that the animators are sneaking in behind your back?
The answer is yes, I think. The tricky thing with the answer is that I do keep discovering that there are more things that they snuck in that I didn't realize. So I don't know if I'm done with that. I keep finding a lot in a way that makes me think I probably have seen all of them, but thus far I have not reached a point where I feel like I have had enough time of not finding one to tell you that I definitely do.
Yeah. C9 had a... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and honestly, I think what we look for is really where anything looks like an Easter egg in a way that seeing it that way stands out and seems to contradict, I guess, what we're trying to show. I think the approach that we had in a lot of ways was to say, by adding things that are true to you, as long as you're kind of envisioning this story the way that we are, please do, because that, I think, is where so much of what is special about the show comes from. And it's so tricky to walk the line of being here's the vision that we believe is core to the show, but also make it yours in the sandbox that you excel in. And I mean, it in so many ways, it also delivers that value to me of watching the show and being oh, cool, there's this thing that I didn't know, but I think I knew, and I think that's the fun of those things.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Cubby, you want to go grab the next caller?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's been a fun thing for so many people who have been following League for so long, is figuring out where all these little Easter eggs and references are in the show, because obviously it's got mass appeal, but for League folks, it's just been cool to see all the special things that y'all did to make it feel very resonant with the people who've been playing the game for, I don't know, 15 years now. So It's pretty cool. Looks like we've got our next caller here, Murderino. Murderino, where are you calling from?
Calling from Ontario, Canada.
Ontario, Canada. What do you want to talk about on the show?
Yeah, I just want to say I think the album for season 2 probably deserves a Grammy. There's just such a great collection of music on there with a lot of fantastic artists. Was curious about the process in identifying artists that were interested in collaborating and just how much involvement they had in the creative process, whether on the music or the actual scene that had their song, or just how far into the show they kind of got. Especially legends like Stromae being in there is just wild to me.
Yeah, I mean, so on one end, I think there are going to be dimensions to the answer that really Christian and Alex Seaver, you know, like they're the artists to me who I'm like, if you want the best answer, you know, those are the people who most, you know, like were making the decisions that led to, I guess, the surprising and very cool mixture of the music in it. But I'll do my best to encapsulate it. But I want to throw the props to them because it really, in all the ways that you appreciate that, I do too. And they are, you know, like I think from me, you know, they are just crazy geniuses in the way that they were connecting things. I think what we had in place that we knew we needed to hit as a goal. In other words, it wasn't something that could be creatively shifted as the artist came in. Was mostly around the timing of the video to the music, and so there were elements of hitting that I guess that rhythm that were locked in place with us saying that, taking that as your principal, you know, like goal coming in, what's the most creative thing that you can do? The there is another element to it, which is that I know Alex works with these artists through this process and gives them space, or also helps out in many ways to match where they also feel comfortable, I guess, you know, working with those things. It was important to us that those constraints not feel like constraints, I think, that made any choices of the people who performed them limiting, but rather that with those in mind, they helped focus on kind of like the musicians who seemed really to for the reasons that ultimately Alex Seaver, I think, and Christian heard these things in them, approached them specifically, and from that there is so much meaning, I think, that they both brought in the performances and in how that really connects to the story that exists on many levels. I have definitely learned a lot of things in just even seeing the videos of people talking about what they see in it, that for me, I'm like, this on many levels can just be informative of kind of like the things of the people who are making these decisions we're looking at. And I truly do believe that these sort of like invisible threads are things that really a lot of people who worked on Arcane have this just incredible capacity to see an architecture of, which connects, I think, to the way that I think of Jace and Victor looking at the place that Victor is in 209, which is my best way of trying to tell you that to me it is that incredible sort of like mind palace that made it very natural, I guess, that these were the people to approach and that they would knock it out of the park. And I think, you know, I think that for me, you know, like that it confirms it, you know, like, so, but honestly, I think we still go in with a lot of sense of like, not knowing, I guess, how things can shift over time. I know I'm already going on beyond probably enough time to answer more questions in this way, so I'm going to try to stop myself.
No,
but
here's
I feel
a
you.
question I just thought of as you were talking, because you referenced like the team, obviously, that with Alex and Christian, who were like working with all the artists and figuring out how to bring this music stuff in. I know obviously you spent a lot of time working on the writing side and developing it from like kind of that angle. So, one of the thoughts I just had was, for instance, in season 1, the Echo Jinx battle on the bridge, which I remember the first time I saw that, I was like, oh, this is Christian Link. Like I just see this, it turns into a music video and it's epic and awesome. And I wonder, how does that work for you on the writing side? Like, are you like, and then Christian Link does a music video, and then we get back to our characters in another scene, and then he just fills it all in? Or how does this all come together as you guys are merging this?
It's a great example of how hard it is for me to like tackle that question. What I can say is the script that we provided had a totally different thing, where that bridge scene is, but described in a lot of ways what the bridge scene does in the way that we were looking at it. However, it was that specific scene actually was one of the first moments that I think we felt like we'd done enough work together to feel confident that we, refining the whole way, we're looking at this same core vision, in the stuff we were talking about. And I think it was the first time that, with that feeling, Fortiche went and felt empowered to say, like, instead of the script, we want to like do the same thing in the most awesome way we can, and just have no connections, in my mind, to the thing in the script. And yet somehow it comes out feeling like an extremely cool and specific choice that totally serves what we were writing, and is a facet of what we tried to carry on, I guess, in the way that we worked with Fortiche. And yeah, I mean, it's super cool, and also hard for me to say that I understand, but also something that feels right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like so many people would just be so precious and be like, no, this is my script. You're going to just turn this into like a giant animated music fight scene. And so it's cool that you guys had developed that trust to that point where you could just hand it off. I'm sorry, Cubby, you were going to say something, I think.
No, I was going to ask, out of all those, did you have a favorite in terms of a moment that you felt like you were able to create out of the various fight scenes we got in that kind of that type throughout the series?
Are you saying that in terms of kind of like a relationship between the script and the stuff I thought it would be that changed in a similar way, or just a favorite amongst the fight scenes and kind of how they came out?
You tell me. I think either are good.
What I'm having trouble peeling apart from this, but I think it's actually super cool that it's kind of stuck on now, is that the way I look at a lot of these scenes now, I definitely also have audience reactions to those scenes in the mix of stuff that I'm like, seems legitimately to me like something that's in the scene. It's hard for me to know where that came in. And so in that way, I truly do kind of feel like it really is making what we can perceive of the things that that people who watch the show react to a true part of the story for me, like in the only way I can think about it. And that's something that like feels reinforced, feels like it reinforces something that designing champions with League felt like it did the best when that was a piece of it. Like for a lot of these characters, the way that fans interpreted those things to not be what we thought it was became the thing way more than the thing we thought it was at first. Tossing all that out, one of the coolest fight scenes to me, and I will talk about why I picked it, is the fight scene between Vi and Savika, the first one. For me, like, there are so many aspects of looking at that fight scene, and for me coming in, martial arts and I guess just generally like things related to fighting and the forms of it. That's something I've had an interest in varying capacities, and it pulls me. There are a lot of pieces of that even though I feel like I've seen so many fights, the ways in which it found a whole bunch of new avenues to show a fight, but specifically using the tools, of Fortiche, it just across the board felt like it was really eye opening as to what the fights could be. And I, even as I'm saying that, the very first fight with Young Vi does that too, on a more root level with fewer things. But both of those feel, because for me they were formative. I think similarly for everyone, they feel like kind of the first answers that spring to mind.
Hey,
Cool.
Murderino, is there anything else that you wanted to follow up on here, or anything you want to shout out here at the end?
No, I'll just say I definitely appreciate and respect the amount of, like you called out, Travis, the trust between yourself and the music side. It's really nice to see that kind of shared vision on both sides of the production, and be able to kind of hand that off and know that the vision you're kind of establishing is going to be demonstrated in a very unique format that I think more shows and media should take advantage of. Just a little music video right in the middle of an episode's a cool way to do it. No, I think that's it. Otherwise, shout out to Seatbelt, Yoko Kanno. You guys should get them in for the next season if you're loving the Cowboy Bebop. And as always, shout out to the first LTA champions. That'll be Team Liquid and Liquid Plus.
Very good. Thanks so much for the call. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, man.
Guys.
All right. We are filling up the waiting room, so we'll have some more takes going here. Cubby, if you want to go grab them, I'm going to give a quick shout out to NZXT. But yeah, shout out to NZXT who sponsors Hotline League. Really great to have them around with us in the off season as things have quieted down. They make amazing products. We're not going to spend too much time with the NZXT shout outs this week because we are trying to get as many calls in as we can. And I appreciate that NZXT has the relationship with me where they're down for something like that. But please go check out the link in the description if you're watching on YouTube or in the podcast links. You can go find that. They make awesome products, and it's a great time to pick something up, either as a gift for yourself or a gift for somebody else. So we should have Cubby back here in just a moment. But Alex, while we wait, what is in the tank behind you? Because I'm sure a lot of people are curious about it. I did see somebody asking about it in chat earlier.
They are blue-tongued skinks, which are, the easiest thing to do is to look at a video or a picture that you can find of them. They're kind of like, in my mind, sort of like the prototypical shape of a lizard, and I think the fact that they had blue tongues was a big part of me picking them when I was 15, which at this point makes them 25, I think, or 26, depending on where I kind of assume they were born before I saw them.
You've had them this whole time.
Yeah, the fact of them being that age is something I definitely was prepared to make when I was younger than that age, thinking that I was prepared to have pets for that long. But this is where they've wound up. And if it seems like a crazy tank, it's because I can't tell you how crazy it is to me that they're still with me through a crazy ride across the country multiple times and in all kinds of scenarios that I'm like, no way lizards travel about the world this way. And also, I don't know how else they could. But yep, they've been with me in that context, and so here they are with me in this.
That's awesome. Getting their time in the spotlight. We got Khajeet here. Khajeet, where are you calling from?
Columbus, Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio. What do you want to talk about on the show?
Yeah. So my question is mostly around the Piltover Zaun plotline. To me, it feels like it kind of ends in like a Independence Day kind of thing, where there's a bigger bad guy. There's Victor, and Piltover and Zaun come together to join forces, and then they stay together because of Noxus. So I was wondering if that was always the plan, to have it kind of like that Independence Day, aliens shot the White House, so now we have to work together, or if that was kind of thought up in season when you were writing for season 2.
There was a form of that like I think is the thing that you're just discussing, that like was like a lot of that, in the way that I'm hearing it was what we were picturing as the target, I guess, as we were sort of working our way through the story. Scale is a particularly difficult way to look at it. I think if you're going to ask me like how we tweaked it in order to, I guess, address things that we discovered as we were going through the seasons, scale pops up to me in a lot of ways of something I didn't know, I guess, the relationship of between all the characters getting there. Yeah, I think I think I'm tying that to the things that I think you're asking as well as I can.
Yeah, I mean, as another way of kind of bouncing off it, was this a thing where, at what point in time did you know, okay, season 1 is going to be Zaun Piltover conflict, season 2 is going to be, all right, we're gonna move the Zaun Piltover conflict to unifying everyone around the idea of fighting Noxus? Because I do know some people who I've seen online, some folks who were like, hey, I was really invested in the Zaun Piltover conflict, and I would have liked to have seen that fleshed out a little bit more before we headed to, like, let's deal with Noxus. So I guess, yeah, what was kind of the timeline on moving us to this Noxus, this big bad Noxus enemy we have to deal with? And Victor, of course, as well.
Yes. So I think that Noxus is probably one of the biggest elements of how, moving it to season 2, that became a bigger element in the battle. I think it was more Piltover Zaun, sort of, in kind of the framework of what you would see on screen. I think we were always tucking some things in that would point at Noxus. So depending on how you want to say, that's the first domino. That portion of it could still be there, but I think kind of like the literal presence of that is a big part of kind of like the shift as we looked at things that we were looking at, that contributed to this were, I think, oh man, so we were taking into account things that seemed to us like cool aspects of how the community reacted, in terms of kind of like what seemed like stuff that people loved. Also, I think that there were elements of like kind of like changing the organization of things as we went into season 2, that it was kind of like by virtue of changing the order of the story, like, and the way that we were sort of like presenting the characters and the plot lines, if that's at the end of the story more or less than where it's at the beginning of the story, it probably had more presence because of that. I will say that the feeling of wanting to dig into particular stories more and being uncertain about whether that is the right choice that's a big part of, I think, the types of thinking that we changed over the course of time. And all I can say is that I think everybody probably feels like they were doing everything to best service the stories that they thought were the ones that would resonate the most.
Were there any conversations internally as we're talking about Noxus and bringing him into the fold, where I think one of the fascinating things about Arcane is that it is only 2 seasons in a world where, so many studios and groups and streaming services are like, let's see how we can milk as much of this as we can.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is had to have been a challenge for you is you all knew you wanted to tell more stories in this world. You needed to set up some of those stories. Like, hey, if we want to do a Noxus show, we need to start to incorporate elements of a Noxus storyline into this, while also not distracting from the very limited time you have to like wrap up everything with Piltover and Zaun, tell the family story, wrap up what's going on with Victor and reveal, what Arcane is and all that. So I guess how much tension was there behind the scenes and for yourself and being like, okay, we need to get this other stuff in that is in some cases primarily there to serve, or definitely there to serve like another show that we want to create or another story within this world, versus okay, we also want to make sure that we're not distracting from the stuff we need to get done in terms of this story.
What I can tell you is that everything that you said makes sense to me as like the things that were in the mix, and in all the ways that it can be difficult, like when you're juggling all those things. I think we felt those. It got really tricky. I think 209 was a special beast in a lot of ways for us. It needed to tackle those things, and it needed to basically make a statement about where we felt like leaving them was the right choice. That had to somehow accommodate where we can sensibly estimate that there are cool opportunities to pick things up, and also like good resolution to the things that we introduced, and also kind of the considerations you're talking about like leave room. I do think that in the case of League in particular, the leave room thing is something that I think is something that was important to us, but by virtue of already having something like League there, so to me, if elements of how we built this story are different than how other stories are built, it would be my guess about one of the things that may have changed the way that we looked at it, because I do feel like for me, so many characters in League are material and do have real estate when I think about the other characters, and in fact like that real estate that connects them is important to maintain, because the connections start to break down the more that we change the real estate of those relationships. And so in a big way, Arcane takes into account the ambition we have of stories we want to tell in the future, and tries to create space for those while also making them as cool as we want to make them in any like lens that you look at a specific spot.
Yeah. Khajeet, I know I stole your take and kind of ran with it a little bit, but were there other things that you wanted to get in on that topic, or anything you want to shout out here at the end?
I'm kind of one of the people you brought up earlier that I vibed very heavily with the political aspects of season 1, and I was a little let down in season 2, especially with a modern day conflict that has a lot of parallels between Piltover and Zaun. But shout outs to the old color stories that I don't think they've done since Way. Those were for League of Legends characters. Those were sick. Shout outs to Book Chat, greatest chat on the server, and shout out to Loris, who is on my screen a lot.
Catch you later. Have a good one.
Also, really quick, if I can say it,
yeah.
I personally find it hard, I guess, I would find it really hard in a forum like this to talk about stuff that I didn't like or stuff that I felt like I was on the other side of, but I super appreciate that you did. Like, it gives me more, to think about. And like, there, like really truthfully, there's no part of me that would not want you to, but sort of with the trust that, as you did, you've given me a great way to use it to tell more stories, I think. And so I just want to make sure that I also call out, thank you for that stuff. And by the way, like a lot of the comments that people have said about loving the show, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I want to say that, but also like, I also want to answer the question. So if I go there first, it is not for lack of appreciation on either of those two accounts.
Yeah, I know. It is funny to see the wide range of reactions from people who have, like, oh, I want it. It seems I feel like it was probably difficult in releasing season 2 because so many people had so many expectations from season 1 that they'd built up because there's been so
Honestly,
much time
yeah.
in between. Yeah. And so seeing sort of what people wanted versus what they got and where they were happy, it's been kind of neat to see the discussion evolve around all that. And I'm sure difficult as a creator to figure out how to deliver on everything everybody wants after season 1 and realize you just can't. You have to focus on what you're doing. Yeah.
Yep. And they also kind of look like one and the same in so many different ways that you can turn them over. Yeah. But yeah, what I could definitely say is the information we hear will be part of, our continued effort to get better at this,
Yeah. All right. Want to go grab the next caller, Cubby?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what has, I guess maybe a quick question for you while we get the next caller. What has surprised you about the reaction the most? Like, I don't know if there's anything where you're like, wow, I did not anticipate people enjoying this so much or people having this big reaction.
From the ways that I think about all the ways that the story can be anticipated or expected or matched to, I guess, what seems true, I guess, for any given person about League of Legends. Frankly, the fact that it resonates in a way that I that's a thing that I feel, in reactions so much. It hits on a level of like, wow, it really connects to people on so many levels. From my way of looking at it, less than it disconnects. And in a lot of ways, I kind of expected to hear more of the disconnect stuff, and I think I'm trying to do that without trying to bias it in that direction. But it has been uplifting to me because I kind of felt like there's no way something could feel the same for everyone, right? And I don't think that it does, but I do think that the ways that people talk about it, where that hits at points that feel the same to me, it hits in the spots of what we wanted to hit, and that I think is also me trying to talk about your first question, which was kind of like, or maybe not your first, but one of the early questions of the finale and what it felt like to me. So it's like the reactions in a lot of ways felt like, oh wow, like you're all here watching this with me because you chose to be, and you're having this big reaction because this is the thing you wanted to see. And as far as I can tell, nobody seemed like they wanted to punch me directly.
Indirectly, they wanted to punch you, but maybe not.
Maybe,
yeah.
But I also would think that I'd read it a bit directly because, like, I'm looking for it. You know what I mean? Because I'm like fair in a lot of cases. Like I'm like, oh, totally fair. Like in that with that thing, I'm like, definitely would have loved to find a way to give you more of it, and also not give less of something.
Yeah.
So yeah, uplifting, encouraging in a lot of ways. Yeah.
KazKalur is here. KazKalur, where are you calling from?
Calling from Vancouver, Canada.
Ooh, you're a little quiet. I turned you up all the way, but if you can get a little closer to your mic, that would be super cool. Calling from
sure.
Vancouver, you said?
Yep, Vancouver, Canada.
What do you want to talk about on the show?
Yeah, I was curious. Well, first of all, I want to say Arcane's fantastic. One of the best shows I've seen since Breaking Bad. Emotional roller coaster. But I was curious, as a writer and as someone who maybe this is your first time working maybe in the film or like animated space, what were some of the key lessons or skills that you developed that you didn't have when you started this project?
Well, the biggest thing that jumps to mind when you ask the question is that this is the first time that I felt like I could, with a lot of personal connection, watch how each different phase of a piece of a like the art that comprises, you know, like a movie or a TV show, how each of those as they were added resulted in the feeling that I got while I was watching it, because there were parts of those that I thought I understood how big they were, and they were still somehow bigger, or at least different, you know, than the way that I thought about them. And then there were ones that I didn't think that, like ones that I thought were smaller, and that how much they didn't seem to be smaller. Once I went through this process, really gave me a lot of pause for reflection about kind of like all the ways in which those things have served, I guess, to be pieces of the puzzle and things that I've watched. So they kind of send me on this quest in two directions of kind of like, I really need to sit and watch things without with nothing that I'm bringing to the table, you know, and also try to find the ways to see how they play into it more. But at the same time, it's like that I came into it without knowing that, and that really, I think, was the biggest part of how dramatically, I guess, those things impacted me in watching them in this way. For me personally, it felt like, I guess, one of the biggest growths. One of the other things, I guess, that sort of like feels like kind of like in that space of top of mind is that working in a writer's room, the trickiest part of it to me is that it's a whole bunch of people with a whole bunch of ideas that are great in terms of like how much they represent, but also like intensely difficult to communicate when you have none of all of the rest of those tools. There and I think, at least again in my way of thinking about it, none can be proven, you know, I think, to be the right choice or the wrong choice. Taking out of the mix right and wrong as being viable paths of consideration, and then thinking about how what someone is presenting is a seed that in their mind grows into a bigger thing, and how to acknowledge that, in that they're trying to produce some way of describing it, and that whoever is hearing what they're saying, that person is trying to find some way to interpret it. The quest of that, with a lot of respect and trust that those things were worth really finding a way to enable, I think has played a big role, I guess, in my life otherwise, of thinking about kind of like how we talk to each other, and how all the ways in which connections and missed connections may be just based on the phase at which the thing on the table is being discussed.
What kind of things from the writer's room and keeping that environment, you know, free, open, creative, where good and bad ideas are encouraged, like what kind of things do you feel like you took from that and kind of applied to other things that you're now working on, or what were some of the highlights of just that environment for you being a part of it?
That's yeah. Okay. So this just hits in so many areas. I'm trying to like find a good one for you. Okay, there's one that I think I'm trying to avoid, and I think the best way I can do that is to give you an explanation of this thing, because it hits big in the area, and I think you need to get that out in some way. I have recently, in trying to understand, like mostly just because like to me it's like I now can watch AI produce a similar thing to the thing that I produce, right?
Yeah.
Have really intensely been trying to figure out how it does that. Not really from any standpoint, like kind of like in this writer's room way of not trying to look at it as right or wrong, but just trying to figure out like how in the hell can I look at it, based on the things that seem to me to be what it's definitely doing and the things that I seem to definitely know about it, knowing that I don't think there's any way I can qualify those things as totally right or totally wrong. I either lack the expertise or the explanations do not provide answers in these categories. However, they have felt like that they intrinsically do teach me something about what I'm looking at, that almost because of the fact that for me, it only started to make sense, I guess, when I wasn't looking at it through the lens of all the ways I would try to relate it to what I know of reality. Like it's in the space of building a story. It's like there's nothing there in my mind before you build it into the story, and so it's not wrong to follow any line of thinking. I think what was hard with AI as it was introduced to me is that all of the ways that it can impact the world feel like so deeply connected to every single thing I could think about it. So for me, like the way that I felt like I was making more headway in understanding it and feeling like it was a credible way of trying to do that, because of the fact that it's sort of producing words through a pattern, or at least the large language model based ones do this, as far as I'm aware, through a pattern of kind of like producing words to describe something and then looking at words as a way of interpreting them and connecting that in some way to an underlying concept. I feel like I was doing the same thing in a fictional world, and in a fictional world it made a lot of sense. I do not know how that relates to it in the real world, but I can say that for me it feels like a framework that has shed a lot of light.
Yeah. No, it is interesting to hear, especially given there's so many conversations around AI these days, like having sort of the thought-provoking conversation of like, okay, how does this follow the way I handle things, and kind of comparing and contrasting, I think is pretty cool. Kaz, I know we talked a lot about different writing stuff in this conversation, but anything else that you wanted to have touched on along that topic, or any other shout-outs that you have here at the end?
I think if you guys can just continue talking about that experience of working in the writer's room, I think there's a lot of gold there, because a lot of people just don't have that experience. And so it's insightful and one of the best shows ever created to know like what were creating those magic sparks that led to sort of the genius we saw on screen. And in terms of shout outs, just Ionia, please. That's all. Yeah.
Kaz, we're
Awesome
our
stuff.
next call is about is another writer's room question, so you're gonna be excited
Okay,
to hear
great.
the next one. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for the call. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah, take care.
All right. Off Cubby goes to grab the next caller. Yeah, it's been interesting to touch on all the stuff as we get the behind the scenes look at how this has all been created, and how you guys went through the process of all this. And I know we're going to talk more about the writer's room here in a second, but also writer's room that you had been in for many, many, many years, because I know the show had been in development for so long, and obviously we had a pretty long period of time before season 2. So I'm sure it's been interesting as you've been through all the different iterations of it. Looks like we got our next caller here is Mr. BigNonsense is here. Mr. BigNonsense, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Los Angeles, California.
Awesome. What do you want to talk about on the show?
I want to ask Alex a question that I actually had the first time Alex and I had a conversation. Alex, I don't know if you remember who I am. My name is Elias Sanati. I came to you after working on players within Riot, and you gave me some really good advice going into my first writer's room, and I really appreciate that. And I thought of a question after our initial call that Josh Finn set up with us. So this is that question. Was there ever a thing, to the best of your ability that you could say without leaking anything, that you were wrong about in the writer's room, but after the intense discussions and the collaboration, you walked away and you felt like ultimately you let go of the thing you were wrong about and the consensus was correct?
I mean, the only word there that's tricky for me is the word correct.
Oh, fair.
It's the word. It's a word that in no way do I want to say did not result in a product that I was astounded by in many ways. I just hesitate at correct because it's in the stripping away of the right and wrong aspect of the decisions that I most felt like I was able to look at that process in a way that felt the most helpful to it. So it's a yes and in the way that I'm saying it. And yeah, like, I mean, dude, like, in you asking that question, my brain floods with opportunities of something that fits that category. There are so many ways that things don't, but trust me, if you want me to talk about all the things that do, yeah, I will stop at one of the first ones that was actually pretty profound for me. And what I can definitely say is, hands down, at this moment, me thinking about telling this to you, I'm like, well, the only way you could reasonably look at this is, like, in my head, right, is
Right.
like, did you must not have seen the thing that it became at that time. And I'm like, hard agree. But I definitely kind of still feel like I would still have the same stop for similar reasons. I can't tell you that I definitely wouldn't, but the fact of me thinking of it in this way, I do think has loosened kind of like the amount that I guess become attached to something. I hope. But when Powder hugs Silco as a reaction to everything that happened in that moment, and with how important I think that moment felt, right? And I do think this is one of the things that the show, like the amount that particular scene, moment, area, it really is like a pivotal point that is so importantly a pivot, and the way that it pivoted to me really did something huge for the show. That almost is in the middle of it, right? And my way of looking at it at the time, I now frame as kind of like the near field of focus if you were to just think of the way that you would focus a camera lens, right? In other words, there is nothing better or worse about the far field or the near field. All I can say is, in the way that I think about it now, from a near field focus, it just didn't make sense. You know, like it was like to me, I'm like, but like, I'm trying to think of all the things that in my head make that reaction connect to the thing that happened before, and I didn't find any of those. What I did see was that we had been pitching on what we were hoping to be at this location for a while, and that pitch, or the pitch that resulted in that, it had an effect on the room of like, whoa, you know, the amount that can do in the story, and the amount that it can mean, and the way in which it does feel wrong, and yet that almost also seems to make it feel right, in the way that if there were a definitive answer to these types of things in the world, they would kind of feel like they're maybe in the uncanny valley, right? Like, to me, it's like there almost has to be some of that mix. That was a moment that I think I really let go of a lot of that, starting with the reaction in the room and how much that did carry weight to me in thinking about a thing that at the time I was like, it connects in no ways to what I'm looking for right now. But over time, in the ways that I have been able to observe many more ways in which that moment seems to bring things that, for me, I wouldn't have ever seen if I, as I probably would have, slammed the door on it initially, working in isolation, is a really part that to me is kind of the core of why to do a writer's room. And I think it also underscores something that we really endeavored to get the right mix of, which was writers' rooms comprised of a good mix of life experience, in as much as there was any way that we could perceive that, right? Like it was in the effort of diversity that we were trying to create a room where people would be coming from different corners when they were approaching this. And also, and this felt more like something that was like kind of a formula that we created for the show. We wanted to make sure there were definitely people who felt more like players of the game, who knew it from like that game side, and also a part of the room that didn't, because those were things that we knew those were two levels that we knew we wanted it to work on seamlessly, and it felt like making sure the room included those, like, people who kind of only had those viewpoints, was a way to try to ensure it.
I love that you mentioned that part, because I believe it was a piece of advice you gave myself, Tony, and Dan when it came to making the players' writers' room, is making sure there was this divide of super fans who feel very emotionally about these kinds of stories, and writers who are concerned with the most compelling narrative. And I think it was one of the strongest aspects of the room.
I'm super happy that it had that impact, because in my head I'm like, I feel like there couldn't possibly have been advice that I was giving you that
there was
did all that, and, but like, dude, if anything helped, like, man, like it very much fulfills, I guess, the spirit with which it was intended.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was ages ago. We were still in lockdown when we spoke about it, so that might as well have been a different lifetime. But yes, you were very influential and offered great advice and encouragement in a very scary time. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Really do.
Awesome. Elias, anything you want to shout out here at the end?
I want to shout out my wife, Danielle. I want to shout out Travis for hosting the Magic Secret Santa, which was my favorite Magic event of the year. And that includes MagicCon Chicago. Shout out to people who make TV shows just because they really, really, really want to. I think those are the best kind of people to make TV shows.
Awesome. Thanks for the call. We'll catch you next time.
Catch you later.
Yeah. All right. Looks like we've got 2 more callers to go.
Mm-hmm.
I know, Cubby. I know. Oh, he's left. It's been fun to kind of see everything go through. I mean, Alex, what has it been like for you internally at Riot, seeing all this stuff develop? Because I'm sure you had some people who were really clued in on the projects, other people who just sort of stumbled into a screening whenever you started airing season 1 internally. Like, what has it been like to sort of see how the company has reacted to it over all these years?
I think for me, a lot of the identity of the company that I look at, because it is connected to what the company was originally, made it that I had blind spots more connected to the things that felt different from that. Like, it's one of these things where it's like, I just think that, like, what I wasn't looking for, I saw less of. I think Arcane and the reaction it had for people, because it was close to them, and yet in some ways, like, just a thing that Riot does, which is incorporate a lot of artists from a lot of different corners of the world, and sort of like do this blend on some way, and that like adds to the identity of everything. I think Arcane provided kind of like this avenue and this really specific way to look at all the elements that Arcane touched at the company, and also things it could touch, things like it gave me a way to think about what the new company, or again, it's not a new company because there's nothing to base that against, but kind of like the company that it is now, it gave me tools to be able to think about that company in ways that I guess bubbled up more things that ultimately result in an appreciation that I think is akin to what I was interpreting as an appreciation from them in Arcane.
Yeah. Well, we have Mongoose here. Mongoose, where are you calling from?
Hey, I'm from Asia, so Southeast Asia.
Oh, nice. What do you want to talk about on the show?
Yeah, I'll just say that I really love seeing Caitlyn and Vi's lesbian relationship like being represented and being normalized on screen. And one of like the best and biggest series ever. And I was a fan of like Kate Vi since like 2013, since like the League of Legends days. Yeah, so to the actual question for Alex, so I do love the way that Caitlyn was depicted as of like Ionian / Asian heritage, because I'm also an Asian lesbian, so that really spoke deeply to me. And I just want to say that, like in terms of Caitlyn's relationship with Cassandra, it felt very reminiscent of the Asian mother-daughter relationship. So how would you describe like that kind of influence on Caitlyn's upbringing and life in the show?
This is interestingly a place where I feel okay. So I mean, like to put it on the table, I am half Asian, probably in some ways evident. What I think I attribute to either half really to the extent that I didn't even realize that the choices we were making in developing Caitlyn that way had any similarity to me in some way will explain, I guess, the amount that was not a thing that I was aiming for, yet it was a thing that I feel like I was discovering over time because for all the reasons I didn't discover it, I'm like, why not? And I honestly don't really feel like I had a typical experience. It's like I can't even say typical, right? But I don't have an experience with that feels like it represents. If you were to say I grew up in anything that's like half traditionally Chinese and half traditionally white, I'm like, I endlessly feel like that's inaccurate and sort of accurate and maybe completely accurate. There are things that I think are in the way I feel about those things that if they feel like they truly represent that for you, they suggest to me that there is something that actually operates on a level that's like almost lower than the way that I would think about them because of how much they don't connect to me when I think about them, but feel like something that I just could only express that way, that I do kind of believe connect to that. However, it's very important for me to say at the same time, none of these characters are characters that I develop alone, and the process of developing them does, sort of like take them in the direction that they are. And it one of the first things I think about when you ask that question is the artist who was working on Caitlyn, because I think that was the first context in which that choice, felt like a development of Caitlyn beyond the game. And
when you say artist that was working on Caitlyn, do you mean like the original character artist, or are you talking about within Arcane specifically?
The one who is working on Arcane's first concept of Caitlyn. Gotcha. So yeah, and also it's like, hey, Heaven, but it's like I think he had something that he was looking at in that design that very much played like what I kind of think of as like the first seed of all the developments that were built in the spirit of that. So in a lot of ways, I'm like, it's a big part of why I don't necessarily think that it had anything to do with me, and yet the amount that I think it clicked for me, maybe it was actually that, maybe it wasn't, I don't know, but it did, so I'm with you on that front. And I think a lot of people also carried that, like really, really found that and found ways that they keyed into that thing. I know for the actress Katie who plays it, we've had conversations on this point. I kind of want to have more, honestly, because I feel like in so many junctures, it's like I'm discovering things. But I think it was important for both of us as an aspect of her as well.
Mongoose, I don't know if you have a follow-up question or anything that you wanted to ask or add there.
Yeah, no, thanks, Alex, for answering that. That was like really good to hear. And I think with Katie as well being like one of the only Asian like cast members, in the show, it was just really good to see that, even if it wasn't really intentional. Yeah, that was really great. I just have one last question, just in terms of like the Caitlyn and Vi relationship, like because we they had a very tough breakup, and then they got back together in that one scene. Yeah. So was there any like plan, or was there any like kind of scenes in between that they were supposed to have, that, like reconciling before, just having that final scene of them in the cell?
There were scenes that I wrote without getting to the point of knowing that they were definitely part of that episode in that way. So it's kind of like, for me, in a lot of ways, like I think that I think about the story in dialogue in a lot of ways, and so the dialogue plays out in a scene format. So in my head, there are a lot of scenes that kind of fill in the space in between things, and like, I'm not gonna lie, like it is a difficult and necessary thing, I think, for us to try to shave those down in order to be able to tell the right amount of story, again, in context with everything else, and also just, like I said, leave space, that I think we believe we want to leave, while also saying that I will say, with episode 9 in particular, I can't think of another episode where I personally, with that philosophy, felt so much like I didn't know how to feel about those stories without all that information, but simultaneously was trying to deliver it in that format to try to tell a story that is complete, I guess, in that way.
Did you think?
I'm so sorry if that feels like a non-answer. I really like, for me it's like I guess the simplest thing is like we wanted to not take up more space than we had to, and like really did our best to do that and not hurt the story for people. But I definitely understand that there's a lot of implied story in the space between.
Yeah. Mongoose,
yeah.
Mongoose, thanks so much for the call. Anything you want to shout out here at the end?
Just thank you to Alex for answering these questions, for Travis and Kabi for hosting this, and also shout out to Tina for letting me know that this show exists. Thank you.
Yeah, normally
Thanks for
covers
calling.
esports stuff. If you're ever interested in that, specifically the Americas region, we'll be talking more about that soon. But for this episode, at least, you get some Arcane content. So thanks, Mongoose, for the call. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. And we've got one more caller, and then we'll probably do just a couple quick wrap questions, and then that'll be the show. So,
Yeah.
Gabi, I know that we've been going rapid fire from caller to caller. What was your topic that you wanted to touch on?
No, it's fine. I was really curious how, obviously, like Arcane changed up some of the lore for characters. I think one where it's the clearest is Warwick, and incorporating Vander into that story. Like, what was the origins behind that idea in terms of taking that character and really like reshaping his lore by having this new character that's now connected to characters that Warwick wasn't previously connected to in lore?
I think that emerged. It was one of the earlier things, so we were still in, what in my head is kind of like the ground floor of figuring out the story, and that was something that, as we were figuring out Vi and Powder's story, the fact that Vander could be Warwick was for us something that felt really in keeping, with everything that we thought about Warwick, and yet something that just felt like this crazy cool, add-on to those stories. That was actually like a pretty, I would say it was definitely a foundational factor in how we envisioned that relationship. We did not expect to tell nearly as much of that story. It was kind of something that we felt like was going to be more of just a space left, and that was when we reached season 2 and kind of like were doing some reshuffling, it really became bigger in a way that I think it was great to have the opportunity to get to dive into that and look at it a bit more. Yeah.
Cool. Well, you want to grab the last caller?
Yeah. Let's go get our last caller.
Was it... actually, here's a general question, Alex. It, I think relates to Arcane, but it's just something that's been on my mind a lot lately. It's so funny. I've been going back and watching a bunch of YouTube videos in the most nerdy way of learning a lot about the back behind the scenes creation of Star Trek: The Next Generation, which show that I grew up watching. And it's so funny to hear them talk about how they were making like 23 episodes a season, and they're like filming these in like 2-week periods of time. They have to film an entire episode and get everything out the door. And then it's made me reflect on, and I see this time and time again, whenever streaming came up, it was like, okay, now there's 15 episode seasons. And then, now it's 13 or 12. And then, with Arcane, we see 9. I've seen other shows on Disney that are 6. So I guess just how constrained do you think? I mean, obviously you've talked a lot about trying to make sure that you weren't taking up too much space with one story versus another because you had so much to put out there. What do you think of just the way that we've seen in just a couple of decades, like TV series get crushed down to a much tighter window, probably in some ways for a good way. Everybody has those like throwaways or filler episodes that they don't like, but other times I'm sure it just makes it really constrained sometimes to tell the full story.
Yeah. So, to me, a lot of elements of story for me are kind of like, it's like there's pro cons to everything. Like, I think the fact that there are pro cons is one of the things that is the clearest part of this answer. I think that some of the pro cons related to, let's just say, like TV that doesn't, it's like the kind of classic episodic structure in my head was sort of like built with this sort of like, it could go any number of seasons, we don't know, but we hope it's a lot, right?
Yeah. And
there's a very cool pro to that for me was very exciting as TV sort of hit this kind of watershed moment in my mind. It was probably around the time of I think a lot of people talk about Sopranos as kind of like one of the things that kicked off this sort of like phase of like, whoa, TV is like in the movie space in a lot of ways in terms of kind of like the gravitas of the stories that it's talking about. I think that that paired with the structure of like, don't know where you're going to end, but set yourself up well and leave space. For me, like, the cons of it are that without being able to understand what your endpoint is, you constantly have to know that you're hitting a satisfactory endpoint for an arc that you're building at whatever rate that you're trying to build arcs. And I think it is good to look at what you can see of that show in all the ways that people can look at it as it's happening. But that definitely means that what you're going to be looking at can't be, in some ways, the same as the thing you're looking at the beginning. And the tricky part with this is that I can't really think of any way to like definitively classify those in some way that I can account for them for certain on both sides, and so it really is just sort of a trade-off. I think what limited series bring to that framework that seems like it takes the best of both worlds is that, again, you're setting a point for that endpoint, and so in that way your story is finite, so there's no point where you're, I guess, trying to find a way to build an arc where the frame of that arc is kind of like some big new change, that is not a change that you already somehow had incorporated. So this jumping the shark point, I think for me, really happens at that moment where it's like you're just like, the need to tell a story that satisfies a criteria of being like cool for all the reasons it should be cool at that point in time, it is. I gained quite a bit of appreciation for all the factors of how hard that is. I think with movies, there was an interesting thing that kind of presented itself early to me, and I think, I think I still hold this just with like more sub things. Movies, I think, can be character focused. That is definitely something that I've seen in movies, but I think that in the ways that they uniquely can not be compared to TV, it's based on the fact that within a movie, it's like the constraint of the time that you can show things on screen. It's like it has to be an event, and that event may or may not be something that is defined by character, but the fact of that makes it more plot oriented at the starting point than I would say that TV is. And so I think that what TV brought was like this like almost movie tier investigation of character that previously movies could fly without it in a way that could make it be invisible. I don't think it was flown without that, but I do think that like I can understand why I thought of it differently that way, and it actually for me like helps me think about what is a priority at a pacing point. Like, do we need more plot here? Do we need more story? And that actually disentangles a lot of things about like how to use exposition, how to think about the speed of things, when especially in Arcane, it's really hard to know the speed of it because of the way Fortiche, designs the kinetics in the scenes. And I think that kind of addresses, I guess, like what the format is introducing, kind of like to the extent you're asking.
Yeah. I know it's interesting to see sort of how other people think about it, and I hadn't really thought about the relationship with Fortiche. It's so funny to think. I think we look at the show and its final product and are just like, "Yep, a bunch of people sat in a room and then they made this." And it's interesting how frequently throughout the conversation it's been, like this handoff relationship that you and Fortiche had in terms of co-creating this. So it's fun to hear. Looks like we have ppdoc here. ppdoc, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Baltimore, Maryland.
Baltimore, Maryland. What do you want to talk about on the show?
Yeah, so I just had a couple questions about, I guess I centered it around the first episode of season 2, which heavily featured the Heavy is the Crown song. It was the title of the episode, the overall kind of theme of what the episode is about. And I just found it pretty amazing that the episode,
you're kind of breaking up a little bit. I think I have your take here. If we can't get your microphone stuff sorted out, but you want to give it one more try? Oh, we might have just lost them entirely. Okay, so here's what here's what ppdoc wrote in the chat, so we can just look at that. Can Alex elaborate on the timeline for how quickly the first episode was produced and created? Because the song was released September 24th, and the season premiere was very beginning of November. Did they really create the entire second season in 1.5 months? I'm sure the answer is no. Or was the season premiere created after other episodes in the season to add the song in later? Curious about how long a show like this takes to go to start to finish on an episode, season, etc. So just a general question, I think, about how long it's gone, but using the fact that, like, to the music team and Fortiche's credit, and just the general team as well, Heavy as the Crown felt so perfect for that episode. But also, there's no way in which that song comes out or is coming out, and then the whole show, the whole episode is crafted around it. So I guess it's kind of a two-parter here of like, how long did it take to make an episode, would you say? And then also, how were you able to kind of weave this song in so perfectly to that first episode?
So I think like a reasonable scale to think about of like kind of like how long it takes it's like like almost there's something I want to say at the beginning, which is like we've now worked on the project for 9 years. The release of the first season was at the 6-year mark, and we're close enough that the 9-year mark is for season 2. I think the reason that it didn't take 6 years is we had built the studio, I guess, that would now assemble the thing, and so that's the biggest part of where I kind of attribute the shave in the time too. I think 3 years is pretty reasonable, I guess, for looking at like these seasons. I just have to add this heavy caveat that I think many people would certainly have loved to have a bit more time, because it is a huge endeavor at every step, particularly with animation. I didn't realize how with animation so much stuff is just it's like time just stretches, when you're looking at it. Seconds equate to more than days, in some of the ways that animators can work on them. The process of us understanding these songs across this spectrum. Sorry, to talk about the episode length. Depending on how many things the episode is connected to, the development of that episode, I think, fluctuated more. And I would say that like the finale episodes felt like they took longer in a way that I think is connected to how much it is a fruition of understanding all the things that it's speaking to as you go. And so the development of that is something that's just kind of like ongoing in the different phases with a different regard to the other episodes. And then like as you're building these episodes, like it's kind of like you're putting this stuff together. You don't know what the challenges will be as you're developing it, and many episodes that seem, I think, in retrospect, as though things click very sensibly. Those were things that we like. Sometimes we really, really, really reconsulted them and like re-examined them, and like they're the way that us working on that episode is itself a story, which is as if to say, like, basically, like it's more about the nature of the episodes to us in the relationship to the story, and kind of like the pieces that are added to it that really defines kind of like the length. And we do try to measure that ahead of time by looking at things like how many characters are there, how many environments, how many props, and how when we initially think about those, do those present places where we're like uncertain, I guess, of what it is that we're looking for, and that has only so much correlation to the places that we encountered that. But I do think us doing it was important to the way that it was developed, and also like I think generally a pretty good answer for how it's done in animation. That, I guess, connected to sort of like how much that spans across thinking about these episodes, and how much the trail of an episode can impact everything else. Like to me, is I think when we're going to season 2, the fact that we had more time to think about that in some ways made it harder, but like for the simplest version, the artists, they would see only content. They would basically see like something that was curated down to everything that we felt like was good context for what they were doing at the varying times that we had anything to show them. And in a lot of those times, it was dramatically less than a final product. And for us, at the same time that I think something like a final product was coming in, that's also at around the same point. I'm speaking actually for me, and so us is riskier, but like that's also at the same point that the artists were presenting this material. So a lot of the music was coming in at stages where whether that call at the end of the day was exactly the right thing, it would have to just be seen with the final thing. But like again, like I mean, so many of these artists to me, it's like the only thing you're thinking is like, holy hell, I really can't wait to see what they would do.
Yeah.
And for season 2, that was a very strong feeling with a lot of those choices.
Yeah.
Out of all the things in season 2 that like you found great, like what's one thing off the top of your head that an outside artist did that just like blew you out of the water? Like, wow, I wasn't expecting that.
I do think that the songs, like in this context, the songs that were in other languages, for me, everything felt really right about like wanting to that to be an element of what we wanted to bring into the show, but it also made it like surprising, and I would say that, but it was surprising for all the right reasons, and it just delivered, like those things. I went to China for the first time in my life, I guess, as part of like places we were going with the season 2 premiere, because COVID was happening, I guess, around the first season, and it lent so much more meaning to that, to the song developed in the Chinese language, seeing it next to Chinese people, and again feeling that kind of like intangible, ethereal kind of like meaning, I guess, beneath it, while also, for me, like really absorbing it in something that felt like the final form, because the word final you see at many points, and then with little extra tags appended as people do their very best to let go of a thing that they desperately want to make better.
Yeah.
Forever.
That's so funny. ppdoc, I don't know if your mic is with us yet, but if you...
I put my old mic on. Can you hear me?
Okay, cool. Yeah, if there's anything you want to... I don't know if we have time for any kind of follow-up there, but anything you want to shout out or say here at the end?
Well, I just want to commend... I mean, obviously, it's pretty amazing to like hear how well that song, specifically "The Heavy is the Crown," kind of fit in so kind of perfectly with the show and with the worlds, and with, I know obviously the references to like Faker and T1 defending, and I mean it was like this sort of perfect convalescence around that song. It's kind of crazy. It's like hearing your like a favorite artist drop a new single on the radio and then seeing it in like a TV show you're watching like a month later and just have it fit perfectly. You're kind of like, that's crazy. So big kudos to you guys on that, obviously on the show and all the work you did. I know Travis is probably disappointed to not see Yumi yet. In case you didn't know, his favorite animal just happens to be...
I'm okay with that. We're fine.
So, you might want to work on getting that in season 3 for him.
Thanks so much for the call. We'll catch you next time.
All right, later.
Thanks, ppdoc.
That's funny. All right. Well, we are kind of winding down. I don't know, Cub, if you had a final question or anything you wanted to throw in there. I know I have one.
No, I'll let you fire away with any final questions.
Yeah, I mean, just as kind of a fun thing, how... okay, I know, or maybe you're hiding on social media accounts, but unlike Christian, you are much more behind the scenes. I can't tag you to say that you're coming on the show or anything like that. I don't know if that means that you never look at social media, or if you have seen a lot of the memes, or if they've been shared with you around the show. There's the like release the extended Kate Vi cut Alex or that Christian I think sparked by suggesting, I think in some interview, or maybe it was you, that there was an even more extended version of that scene that was going to be out there. There's funny things on TikTok of all the characters coming back and having like this super happy ending at the end. There's all these memes about how Singed was just got everything he wanted at the end and there was no repercussion. So I don't know if you've seen any of the stuff, if anything has sparked joy for you in any of that.
Oh, I mean, I have seen so much stuff that has sparked joy in so many ways that I couldn't know it would. And then in other ways where I'm just like, yeah, nailed it. Or totally missed, and for some reason this still brings me joy. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think it's really just the engagement factor of it, right? Like that it gets to that point of someone feeling so moved, I guess, to do almost anything expressive as a reaction to it. However, it is very true that I do not use social media. I would love to tell you that at a root level, this has anything to do with me in any way thinking about social media and whether it should be part of my life. If I'm being as honest as I think I can be, because this is a tricky one, I think it's because I actually feel more like a gamer that social media is really hard for me, because in the little time that I feel like I have to do that sort of thing, I so much want to fill that with playing a video game rather than the things that I think happen with social media. I very much feel that there's probably a ton of things I don't know about it that are great reasons for me to make a different decision.
Yeah.
I also just know that like the probability that I'm not gonna pop in another game that I'm like, oh, I really wanted to give this a go, or just hit a game that is a familiar friend from what can feel like ages and lifetimes ago. Those things usually hit before any impulse to go to social media, and I do truly apologize for anything that deprives, but do also kind of feel like I definitely don't want to change the things that I think are important parts of the way that I do the things that people like.
Are there any memes then that have been linked to you, or any funny clips or edits or anything on YouTube that you have had sent to you that you've seen that stands out to you that you really enjoyed?
Okay. This one. I will. And Travis, I think you will get a bit more out of this one. So one of the very first people that I worked with at Riot on the story, well, there was a guy who was hired there, Sean Carnes, who was kind of the only guy who was doing it before that, and then the first person who joined the team as in that was their only job title, was I guess me after that, and then the person who joined next became, I guess, for me, like really my first partner in the endeavor of this quest. And we knew so little at that time and dreamed of so much and really tried to bring that to life, and also argued endlessly about what it was, the thing that the world was, and all the reasons that we thought it should be that. And in some ways, Arcane is a fruition for this person, who Travis also knows, that she sent me some memes about Jason Victor that, for a lot of reasons, I don't want to talk about the content of those memes specifically, but I will say that for me, there was a very special meaning to the sharing of those memes of those characters, and also the fact that sharing those memes, like some person in like the world like made those memes and felt like making those memes was important, and then the sharing of the meme was the format that this person sent this to me, and that all is in its own way the biggest and best fruition of that initial dream that I think I could have experienced, and I'm also eager to find out the ways in which there are the ways that it doesn't do that, and I will feel that as we continue to go.
Oh, that's so funny. What a great way to really bring things full circle on so long of a story of League of Legends lore getting us to season 2 of Arcane. Oh, that's so funny. All right, well, let's do a round of shout outs, because I know we got to go around the circle here as we're wrapping up the show. We're a little bit over time, but Cubby, I know it's been a quiet episode for you as Alex and I just got back and forth on the lore stuff, but I've seen people in the chat harassing you about a football game or something that's been happening. So I don't know if you
don't worry about it. It's fine. If we don't need we don't need to talk about the Bears.
That.
Nope, definitely not. Bears suck. No, thanks so much to Alex and everyone else that worked on Arcane. I can't imagine releasing something of that like creative power or level. Thanks for coming on and chatting with us. This was a different episode for me, but it was really fun to get a few questions off, and I got my one fan question in, which is great. I was a fan of the show, and whatever creative projects you guys pursue next, I'll be excited as a fan of League and a fan of Arcane now to continue to tune in. So thank you.
Yeah. Alex, how about you? Any shout outs? Anything you want to see here at the end?
I mean, so many. I think the groups that, I can't not send the shout outs to. I mean, Fortiche, one of the very first things that always springs to my mind when I think about just the kaleidoscope of awesomeness, that's in that show. I think Netflix, definitely was a partner who facilitated helping us out in all the ways that I think were helpful, and not harmful. And I think there's so many reasons that I might have expected that to be different, and really don't feel that happened. In fact, to be honest with you, I really feel like in so many places that I would have 100% understood why people could have come in very skeptical. I think so many people gave this a chance in corners that, to me, it's like I'm floored, honestly, that there were elements of just like going to the level of people who I previously would have thought man, these people aren't the people who believe in the true passion of the thing. These are the people who are on the outside who don't get it. I still feel like, there are relationships like that, but also I personally witnessed and felt and appreciate how many people with really just an inkling of what we wanted to do took a chance and deserve, I guess, to me, the credit of that. So, in that category, definitely Netflix, Riot, I guess pursuant to that, the various teams that also worked with us in so many capacities in producing all of the content around the show, and of course, principally everyone who everyone who's a fan, everyone who watched, everyone who feels anything, and for some reason that is part of it. To me, it is as central to the making of the show, because I really do think that the only reason it was important enough to chase this and to build it the way we did is just because of how much we wanted that thing to feel for the people. We wanted to have the same feeling that we have about this world and these characters and the stories that we think can and should be told. So, thanks so much, and keep telling us what these stories mean to you, please.
Well, I think here I do want to give my shout out to you guys for working on this. I think it's been very funny because I have somebody who's so deeply invested in fantasy stories and just the act of creating really compelling stories, especially in video games. And Arcade has been so funny for me because, much as you alluded to earlier, I was around at the beginning of League of Legends lore, and I remember getting very invested in it. And then I think what happened over time was, to me at least, it felt as though Riot had a bit of an identity crisis in terms of what they wanted to do with that lore. I felt like every couple of weeks there was a new retcon of a different thing, and so then I kind of threw in the towel and like keeping up with it, which was very ironic given that I care so much about lore and will do deep dives on YouTube channels and talk to friends and some times in the past hosted content around everything from a Brandon Sanderson novel to, I don't know, some other TV show that I was really enjoying. And so whenever Arcane season 1 came out and I went to the premiere and got to see it, I'd had very low expectations because I was like, Riot can't do anything with lore. Like they tried and they've been trying. And whenever it hit so hard, I was like, wait, this is amazing. So it has been really cool for me to see you guys, for me as somebody who's been around since the beta of the game and who had given up on the idea that League world building would get to a place where I could find it compelling. It's been so cool to see you guys just smash every expectation I had and create something that was, I think, really, really unique, along with you guys, but also Fortiche and all the other amazing artists that worked on it. So thanks for coming on the show. It's been really fun, and I'm really happy we were able to get you on and get all our callers in and have this conversation. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for being the guy you are, all the way back to that route we were talking about before, because I think it's definitely added a lot. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. For everyone else, I don't think we will be doing an episode next week because I assume because Cubby's going to be on the road, and then the next week after that will be New Year's. So we're going to get back to you all on the schedule.
It's 2025 for the next episode.
There's a very good chance we won't be back until the 6th, but if something crazy happens, we might be doing an episode in the next 2 weeks. But Cubby and I will coordinate. Stay tuned on social channels, and we'll see you all next year. Thanks everyone for watching.